G'day folks, Sapper here with another World of Warships video. Welcome to BLUF, or Bottom Line Up Front, a series where I review ships but give you the need to know first thing and the in-depth meat further on. Think of it as a ship review video but with a TLDR and ratings for noobs and skills at the end. The Australian Daring class destroyer HMAS Vampire was released to the Research Bureau recently as Vampire 2. While I'm no destroyer main, she's a Commonwealth ship and Australian at that, so how could I pass up the opportunity to review the Commonwealth's first Tier 10? Can Vampire 2 measure up to her Royal Navy cousin? Is she her own ship? And is she worth the 55,000 research point price tag? With all that in mind, here is my review of the Tier 10 Commonwealth destroyer, Vampire 2. The BLUF for Vampire 2 is that she is a strong and competitive destroyer that sits in a similar spectrum to both Z-52 and Daring, but is tactically unique to both. Vampire 2 has impressive DPM, good concealment, and a small number of surprisingly useful torpedoes, but she is a tactical and utility tool more than a cat bully, owing to a combination of a relatively low health pool, crawling smoke, and cruiser hydro. Vampire 2 is a destroyer that rewards very clinical, intelligent play and is far less forgiving of risk-taking or mistakes than Daring. Vampire 2 is an artfully crafted blade that is difficult to use effectively and even trickier to master, but she has a finesse that other destroyers lack. Vampire 2 is the first Commonwealth Tier 10, and as an Aussie I couldn't be happier. Unfortunately for the less experienced players, she is hidden in the Research Bureau, and so players will need to have 5 Tech Tree Tier 10s to gain access to her, not to mention the 55,000 research point price tag. On a reasonable calculation on a fresh account, that's 7 to 8 lines completed, which includes 2 to 3 regrinds, which is dependent on doing ×2s. I don't think this is fair given it's our first Tier 10, but since playing her I do think there is some logic behind the decision by Wargaming, and that pains me to admit. Vampire 2 at first glance is a modified Daring, and while her hull does share some similarities, she has better concealment at 5.8 versus 6 km and 12% better DPM with a stock reload of 2.5 seconds versus 2.8 seconds. She pays for these advantages with only 1 rack of 5 torpedoes, less health, and no heal, meaning she is far more gun reliant and has far less effective health. Vampire 2's torpedoes are actually better individually than Daring's, with 12 km range versus Daring's 10 km, 19,500 damage versus 16,700, and a 96 second reload versus 125 seconds. But Daring is more effective with torpedoes due to quantity over quality. Vampire 2's torpedoes end up being more of a zoning tool than a primary weapon system to factor in. You throw them out frequently and they are useful for some extra damage here and there, but crucially aren't reliable for YOLO rushing battleships. On AA, Vampire 2 is basically the same as Daring, with a single digit improvement in medium range that is so negligible it is only worth mentioning for being so slight, 87.5 DPS compared to 80.5 DPS. Vampire's total effective health pool is substantially lower than Daring, and this ends up framing much of her play in comparison. This comes down to her lack of a heal, which means that if you make a mistake there is no oops button. The maximum possible numbers with relevant skills and flags are 33,030 effective health for Daring and 23,300 for Vampire 2. Vampire 2 isn't really bad in this regard, but on the lower side of average for tier, whereas Daring is notable for it. To give you an idea, Vampire 2 has 23,300, Gearing has 22,900, and Z-52 has 23,800. Bottom line for health, because of Vampire 2's effective health, she plays very differently to Daring. Vampire 2 is not a Daring clone. Where Daring has the edge on durability, Vampire 2 has mobility and utility. Vampire 2 has a distinctive Commonwealth crawling smoke, speed boost, and notably cruiser hydro. This 5 km hydroacoustic search influences her playstyle by working in conjunction with her crawling smoke, DPM, and even occasionally her speed boost to give her strong utility and zoning power. Vampire 2's mobility isn't notable for a destroyer apart from having the option to move while in smoke at 1/4 speed. she can do this with both the speed signal and speed boost on. So when assessing Vampire 2 without her guns, she's a stealthier, squishier daring hull with fewer torps and stronger mobility and utility tools. So how do her guns influence the equation? Vampire 2 has the third best HE DPM and AP DPM at tier 10 amongst destroyers as of this video's release. In HE she's behind Marceau and Smarland, and in AP she's behind Harugamo and Marceau. Given her stealth and tools, this is impressive. Vampire 2's DPM is provided by the same 113 seen on Daring, just with 12% better reload, and she benefits from the same shell characteristics, with her HE being great at starting fires and her AP having improved pen angles. Few enemies can go toe-to-toe with her gun power, fewer still can contend with her gun power, mobile smoke, and decent ranged hydro, if used effectively. Simply put, Vampire 2 is a sustained zone and utility destroyer with sharp teeth. So how do you play her? When I first played Vampire 2, I made the mistake of thinking she was just a different Daring. I tend to be a fairly aggressive player, and in a Daring that can work wonders. Even when I go too far with her, her always ready smoke and ability to heal means I have leeway to make mistakes. In Vampire 2, it's frequently a death sentence. You cannot spare the health, and your smoke isn't always ready to allow you to park up and do some damage for a hot minute. Basic to intermediate level players will want to play carefully and use Vampire 2's smoke and hydro together in a conventional sense to safely shoot things before transiting away from danger with speed boost. Vampire 2 is okay at this job but lacks reliable torpedo numbers, and enemies are generally deterred by her hydro rather than her torpedoes, so keep that in mind. Because of her gun reliance and her lower effective health, many more inexperienced players will find Daring more reliable. Advanced level players can be clever and find creative ways to use Vampire 2's combination of traits to outplay opponents and then recede back into the shadows, only to strike again at the right time. In these more advanced conditions, hydro and stealth are the real tools, and smoke is for farming damage or opportunistic cover. Vampire 2's stealth allows her to outspot most enemies and plan favourable conditions. Hydro allows her to zone the enemy into a trap, and smoke or speed boost to seal the deal. There are some ships that Vampire 2 has to be extra careful around, and like any other destroyer, Smarland is top of the list. Smarland counters most of Vampire 2's advantages through stealth radar and durability. Thankfully, if Vampire 2 can survive the radar windows, she has a sustained zoning power that Smarland can find difficult to engage. One last point that should be mentioned is that like most destroyers, Vampire 2 works well in divisions. This is more true for Vampire 2 than others thanks to her zoning and utility bias that synergizes well with other ships. A well-supported Vampire 2 can be a monster. With that said, onto the build. For consumables, Vampire comes with Commonwealth Crawling Smoke, Cruiser Hydro, and Speed Boost. For modules, pick up Main Battery 1, Hydro Mod for 20% increased duration, or failing that, Engine Room Protection, Aiming Systems, Rudder 1, Concealment, and Range Mod. You can run Reload Mod in slot 6, whether you win a Destroyer exchange or not in Vampire 2 is usually down to positioning of consumables rather than raw DPM. I prefer the Range Mod so you can maximise damage during smoke use. On to Captain Skills. The standard Destroyer 10 points up first, being Preventative Maintenance, Last Stand, Survivability Expert, and then Concealment Expert. After that, radio location for 14 because Vampire 2 is a utility powerhouse and you need to know when you are going to bump the enemy. Then Adrenaline Rush for 17, Superintendent for 20, and Grease the Gears or Flood Chance for 21. The last point is purely personal choice. The full bottom line is that Vampire 2 is a strong addition to the game that should not be compared too closely to Daring or Z52 despite similarities to both. Vampire 2 contrasts her average health pool and useful but small torpedo armament with good concealment, good zoning consumables, and some of the best destroyer gun power in the game. Vampire 2 is punishing if you make mistakes and errors and relies on the player to be knowledgeable, careful, calculating, and decisive all at once. This is because she is primarily a utility destroyer rather than a cat bully, and so wants to be able to dictate the terms of the engagement. Subsequently, she can be rough for more inexperienced captains, but advanced level players will find her to be a precision destroyer and a rewarding ship to play. Vampire 2 is an artfully crafted blade that is difficult to use effectively and even trickier to master, but she has a finesse that other destroyers lack. So how does Vampire 2 compare for noobs or skillz? Vampire 2 gains points compared to her peers for DPM, utility tools, and concealment. She loses points on effective health and torpedo armament. Vampire 2 is the stealthiest pure gunboat at tier 10 and has utility tools to complement it. This is offset by less effective health than other gunboats and a limited number of torpedoes. So for the scores. Noobometer? 6 out of 10. If basic and intermediate level players can limit their positioning errors, Vampire 2 has a good suite of consumables to get some decent results. Skillometer? 9 out of 10. Advanced level destroyer players will be able to capitalize on Vampire 2's strengths to creatively outplay most other ships in the game. My recommendation is to pick up Vampire 2 only if you are a collector or a skilled destroyer player. Others may find her fun and rewarding, but she has a 55,000 research point price tag, and that's a lot of time, effort, and/or money. I'll be honest, I don't think she should be in Research Bureau. At minimum, it requires completing 5 lines and then doing 2 of those again. I think this is a dick move by Wargaming and that she should have been available for free XP. Despite free XP being usable in the Research Bureau, not everyone has 5 tier 10s to begin with. If you liked this review, please give it a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you disagree with my review or think I missed something, please comment down below. If you want to discuss Vampire 2 or suggest future content, please join my Discord Dark Lab, links will be down in the video description. We have some cool tools in there as well, including the amazing minimap renderer by Not Your Father, so please come and say hi. Next up for BLUF is Royal Navy Light Cruisers, which was decided by popular vote in Dark Lab, so keep an eye out for them. I'm also looking at some different in-depth options, so we'll see how they go. Thanks for watching folks, stay healthy, and I'll catch you in the next one.